Hello, and everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of The Pulse with BP. I'm your host, Billy Parvatam. I'm so pleased today to be joined by the radio voice of the Washington football team, Mr. Bram Weinstein. Bram is a native of the Washington, D.C. area. He went to American University, and he's in his first season as a part of the broadcast team for the Washington football team. A real treat for me, as I'm a big fan of the football team. Bram, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Bram, I wanted to start with, how's it been like your first season? I mean, obviously, I think it's a great thrill for you to be able to work for this franchise, but I'm sure you never expected that your first season would be in the midst of a global pandemic. So how has it all been like for you? How have you taken in the process?
The pandemic part's been really tough. Like, we don't travel to any of the road games, so we're calling them off television at FedEx Field, so that makes it, a little trickier and more difficult. There's a lot of protocols to make sure that everyone's healthy. And, that's been a difficult process. But, it's been a blast. And, as we're speaking right now, the team is on a 4-game winning streak and in first place of the division. And I don't think we expected that either. So there's been really recently a lot of good. And, we've put up with what everybody's put up with. I'm not complaining. Everybody's hit it with the pandemic in one way or another.
For sure. You're a Silver Spring native, as I mentioned. When did you know you wanted to go into sports broadcasting?
When I was a little kid. I was the kid who would sit in front of my TV and pretend to call games and do shows. And I knew it when I was a child. It's funny, I teach a class at my alma mater, American University now, and it's in the communications department. And I tell all of them, I ask them the first day, what do you want to do? Most people don't really have an answer for that. I'm like, I'm a lucky one. Like, I showed up at college knowing what I wanted to do when I was 7. I don't know what it was, but I just got into sports and sports broadcasting, and I followed my dreams. And, I'm very lucky to be doing what I'm doing right now. It is like the literal living out of a dream job.
For sure. You mentioned you graduated from American University, so you've been in D.C. for pretty much all of your life. So how'd you go from American University to being a broadcaster in D.C.?
So I had internships. American University had a really good internship program. And I worked at Channel 9's WUSA, and at the time Warner Wolf, who's like a legendary sportscaster, was the anchor there. And then in my senior year, I had an internship at what was then Sports Talk 980, WTEM, and that was really fortunate. They were nascent. They were only about a year old. So I got to, I was kind of in on the ground floor of sports radio in Washington. And after my first job, which was in Nebraska on air at an NBC affiliate, I came back to Washington and I got a job with 980, and that kind of got things running for me.
And like I said, you've worked all around the DC area. You've been affiliated with the football team for a while as well. So how did this opportunity to be the play-by-play radio voice for the team come up?
So in the summer, I won't go into great detail, but there was a lot of problems within the organization. And there were a number of people who were relieved of their jobs, including the former play-by-play voice of the team. And that was not expected. I am actually very close with Larry Michael, and he's a friend and a mentor, and I didn't know that was going to happen. I'm not even sure he knew that was going to happen. And the job was available. And I had covered the team for 8 years. I've been in the market for, 13 of the last 20. I think I'm, relatively well known as someone who's associated with the broadcaster with the team. I've been on the broadcast before, so I, reached out to the people in the organization and said I'm interested. And I didn't hear back. And a couple days later, they announced that Julie Donaldson was hired as the head of media. And, the good news was I had a relationship with her. And so I reached out pretty quickly, and we got to talking. And within a couple of weeks, she picked me to join her in the broadcast booth.
Yeah, that's definitely awesome. A great opportunity for you because, like I mentioned, you've really been making your reps in the DC area for a long time. So, we kind of talked about it with my first question, but, how has it been like calling games in 2020? Can you take us through what's it been like? You're not traveling For example, how is it like to, call a game off a monitor at home? I mean, what's all of that process like?
It is, it's tricky. I mean, like, you're kind of a prisoner to whatever the camera shows you. So, the timing is a little bit off. Like, we want to get out a few seconds before a play is going to be run so I can set up down distance, time, score, all that stuff. And sometimes the camera gets there late, or sometimes you'll see a flag thrown, or sometimes you'll see a challenge. Like, there's just a lot of things that are, and keep in mind, we have the sound down, we can't hear what's going on because we have our own broadcast to do. So you're just kind of a prisoner to whatever the cameras show you, and it just makes it tougher. That's all. I mean, like, it's not impossible. It's just different. And, now that we've done 7 of them that way, we've kind of gotten used to it, but it's just harder, and it's exponentially easier when the game's going on in front of you.
For sure. Like you mentioned, you called 7 games in your Washington football team career. How do you prep for the game? I mean, football game, it's only once a week, but I'm sure it's an arduous prep process leading up to the week. So what's the process that you go through in order to prep for the game?
So it kind of starts tonight, Tuesday. I will typically watch the Washington game over from the previous Sunday first to see if I saw what I thought I saw. And that's the easiest part of it. I can kind of go back and make some notes about how they played and what happened. And then starting tomorrow, I will start getting the process ready to get ready for the opposing team. And I'll end up watching, at this point of the year, 3-4 research games of those teams, and start getting notes and compiling ideas and get some thoughts on how the game's going to play out and get some thematic ideas for it. And then we'll go through by Friday and Saturday injury reports. We'll go through notes from around the league. Releases will be out by the team, so we can get a lot of statistical information ready. It's a lot. I mean, it doesn't really end. Like, I call Sunday night an information dump. All the things I remembered about the San Francisco 49ers just kind of go out the window, that night, and the process for Seattle starts the next day.
So what specifically are you watching for when you watch previous games? Are you watching for maybe how a team operates in a certain situation, third down, long distance downs? I mean, what exactly are you watching for when you watch back these games?
A lot of things. I mean, I'm looking for tendencies. Like, I'll give you an example. Last week, whenever Kyle Juszczyk was lined up on the same side of the formation as Ross Dwelly, they were running that way. I mean, without a fail, every single time. So whenever I saw that in the game, I would be able to call out that that's probably what they were going to do, and that's where it was coming. Yes, third down situations, who do they throw the ball to? Who do they like to throw it to? Do they run or do they throw? Do they blitz a lot on third down? What are their tendencies that way? And then I think just in general, which players are hot, for the other team right now. I think timing matters, You'll hear a lot of things like this week, all the Seattle media will be talking about Terry McLaurin. He has 4 catches for 30 yards, in the last 2 weeks, so he hasn't been the impact player. So I try to look at the other team and try to stay away from narratives and get a sense of, what are they doing well right now? What do they like to do? Who are their favorite targets? What are their tendencies? And hopefully it helps kind of shape how we feel the game's going to go, and we can give some color to what's going to happen.
And, we've seen, in the national media especially, I mean, some of these boards that broadcasters have before calling a football game. I mean, I remember a few years ago, Sean McDonough had a pretty big board. He showed us during the Monday night games. But how big is your board, and do you have specific information you like to put on your board? I mean, how do you go about organizing it?
Yeah, there's a company that makes them, so I have them come, but with all the general stats of what's happened in the last game, season, career, all that type of stuff, and then it leaves me blanks for everybody to fill in with my personal notes. And it's 2 pages each side. One side has, one card has Washington's offense and defense on one side, opposing team on the other, and I don't know, they're like, 16 by 20 cards. I mean, they're relatively large.
For sure. How much of an adjustment has it been for you to just, refer to the football team by their new name? I mean, you've obviously grown up in the DC area. You've worked for this team before in other capacities. I mean, have you fully adjusted now, or is it still like you catch yourself having to, hesitate for a second before you?
Just hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. Excuse me 1 second.
No problem. Yeah. So has there been an adjustment for you? Yeah. So my question was, has that been an adjustment for you? I mean, you've worked for this team in other capacities. Do you still find yourself catching yourself every now and then?
On my radio show, I say it all the time. Like it's almost like a crutch. I can't get rid of it. I have yet to say it on the broadcast, not once. We had kind of a running joke at the beginning of the year that we would bring a jar into the booth, and if any of us said it on the air, you'd have to put $20 in the jar, and the jar then would be given to charity. And the three of us, D'Angelo, Julie, myself, none of us have said it once the entire year. So that's quite an achievement. I actually like it the way it is right now. Like, I think this team is traditional and nostalgic, and I'm glad they didn't do anything quick and didn't make a name, and make a mistake, and make some cartoonish name that they regret. So I'm glad they're taking their time and thinking about this.
For sure. And you mentioned you work with Julie Donaldson and D'Angelo Hall. What's the dynamics of calling a game in a three-man booth with those two?
So, we're kind of working that out now. And, that part is a work in progress, really. Like, none of us had ever really done it before. So we had to work together. And, I think we've kind of found our roles. Like, obviously, D'Angelo is going to bring most of the expertise and of the game, obviously, and breakdown and analysis. And Julie's really got, because of COVID, she's the only one of the three of us that has any real access to the team at all. So she's speaking to the coaches and the players and kind of has all of the information of really what's going on with the team. And it's a balancing act, it depends. We have a lot of narratives that we talk through, throughout the week and specifically before the game. And we hope that we're able to tell those stories during the game, but it depends how it plays out. And that's the balancing act of it. That's the fun part of it, though. It's live. You just don't know what's going to happen.
For sure. I was kind of wondering, I don't know if you consider Julie Donaldson your boss, but certainly someone you had a relationship with that helped you, get into this position. I mean, is it kind of weird working with her, that directly in a three-man booth, or is that something that wasn't even an issue at all?
No, that's not an issue. I mean, she hired me, so technically she is my boss, but, I know what my role is, and, I'm happy with it. Like, I'm not in any way like, I wanted to call the games. That's what I'm doing. So there's no friction at all. Like, and she's been great. And she, I think we have a lot in common. She has a journalistic background. Like, she's been a reporter. So we're on the same page all the time. The balancing act for both of us, honestly, is when things weren't going very well, was how do we frame it? Because most of our, kind of backgrounds and inclination is just be honest about it, but we are doing a team broadcast. So it's not to lie, but we just want to not frame it overly negative. So we've both kind of, I think, gotten used to that part of it, but the good news is they're winning these days, and it makes it easier.
For sure. And you mentioned D'Angelo Hall, and we talked about before we started this recording that I'm a Virginia Tech student, big Virginia Tech fan. Has D'Angelo Hall shared any great stories about Tech with you yet?
Just a few, not a lot. I mean, not much, really. I mean, I think every once in a while we'll run into, a player on another team that went to Tech, and we allow him to bring it up, but there isn't much really to tell from my end on that.
For sure. And what's your best advice for calling radio football? I mean, knowing what you know now, having been through 7 games, working in a three-man booth, if someone were to come up to you and say, give me, a couple pieces of key advice in order to call a radio football game, what would you say?
The first thing was the best advice that I got from most of the play-by-play voices around here who I kind of leaned on for help, going into it, was you're going to have to be more repetitive than you think you need to be, where down, distance, game situations, score, timeouts remaining, all of that needs to be repeated consistently. I think Joe Beninati, who calls the Capitals game, said, you really should be saying the score every 90 seconds. And he goes, if you need to, he said to me, he goes, you should bring like a 90-second hourglass with you, turn it over every time you say it. When that sand runs out, you need to say it again. And he's right. Like, the listeners need to be reminded of everything. And it's important. And then the rest of it, should be your personality. How the plays play out, you need to be obviously very descriptive and hopefully energetic in the right way. But I think that's a natural craft part of it. All that mechanical stuff is things you don't really think about when you're doing it, and it was very helpful for me.
For sure. And, we've talked about it, and you mentioned it, that the football team is on a hot streak right now. They've won 4 in a row. Obviously, great to see. And it could happen this year. You never know. But, consistently, Bram, how does the football team get back into Super Bowl contention? I mean, you mentioned it. This is a storied franchise, and nowadays it seems like you've got to compete with the teams that have a really solid quarterback and, a lot of other factors going on. So how does the football team kind of get back to consistently competing for Super Bowl contention in a division that's definitely interesting at times in terms of the parity and also just given the historic nature of the franchise?
So I think that's going to be their huge question in the offseason, who's going to be the quarterback of the future. And I think all options are open. I mean, I don't know who's going to be available in free agency. They're not obviously going to get Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. So do they like one of the other quarterbacks that are lower in the draft class that's coming out? Or do they believe that Dwayne Haskins can turn into the quarterback of the future? And, at this point, I think it's premature to guess any of it. Like, is Alex Smith back? Maybe. Is he the long-term answer? No, obviously. So I don't know what they're going to do there. And I think for now, they're just happy that they're ahead of schedule, where they are leading this division. They're playing extremely well. And the part of their team where we had expected them to be dominant has been. So if you're wondering what the path is back to Super Bowl contention, last time, I've always heard in my life that defense wins championships. And they've got the best young defensive line in football, period. So we'll see about all the other parts. And I agree, quarterback is a huge, huge issue for them in the offseason. But I do think they have some building blocks that you can grow around very quickly. And I think you're seeing it happen in real time right now.
And my final question for you, Bram, you've been so gracious with your time, especially as you're running errands, but where do you see yourself 10 years from now? I mean, I know that might be hard to picture because, you're right in the middle of your first season with the football team calling radio play-by-play, but where do you see yourself 10 years from now? I mean, are you currently happy where you're at? Are you content? Is there something else you might like to try out? What are you thinking about, where you might be come 2030?
I hope that I'm doing this. This is the only job I've ever really desired and wanted to do. I feel very lucky and privileged to be doing it, and I don't want to do anything else. And, obviously that's not going to be up to me ultimately, but I told them when they hired me the first day, I said, I'm never going to not want to do this. And my first season, albeit with the challenges of COVID, it's a little different than you would have pictured it in some ways. It's been a blast. I've never had more fun doing something in broadcasting, and I've been very lucky to do a lot of really cool things in this industry. And I would hope in 10 years from now, I'm still doing this.
For sure. Bram, and it's been a pleasure listening to you. I think you're doing a great job. And again, thank you so much for taking some time to chat with me today.
Sure, no problem.
That's Bram Weinstein, the radio play-by-play voice of the Washington football team. Thanks so much to him for joining us. This has been the latest edition of The Pulse with BP. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.